Hi everybody, welcome to our 1.6 and 1.7 lecture video, and today we have a little bit of help from LEGO Spider-Man. We're going to be talking about multiplying and dividing integers, and I think it makes a lot more sense to do this on the number line today. So we have a little bit of help. Let's see what happens. So first thing is, what happens if we have a positive times a positive? So maybe we have, for example, 2 times 3. Positive 2 times positive 3. Well, that would be our friend LEGO Spider-Man. He's going to start on 0, and he's going to face the positive direction. Hi, everybody. And what he's going to do is he's going to take 2 steps, and each step is going to be 3 long. So he's going to make 2 of these hops. He's going to hop once, and then hop again. And where he ends up is positive 6. Because he hopped once to 3 and another time to 6. He went in the positive direction both times. And so what we see is that a positive number times a positive number equals a positive number. Alright, what happens if we have a positive times a negative? So this would be like 2 times negative 3. So our friend Spider-Man is again going to start at 0. And he's going to face the positive direction yet again. But this time, each of our steps is negative 3, which means that he's going to hop backwards to negative 3, and then hop backwards 3 more. And so what ends up is he's going to land at negative 6 this time. And so this time, he's facing the positive direction, but he's hopping backwards a couple of times. And so he ends up in the negatives. So a positive times a negative equals a negative number. Alright, what happens if we have a negative number times a positive number? So this would be like negative 2 times positive 3. So this time, instead of facing the positive direction, our friend Spider-Man is going to face the negative direction, because we start out with a negative 2. So we're going to face the negative direction and do 2 hops in that negative direction, and each hop is forward. So he's going to hop forward once to negative 3, and another time to negative 6. And so that's why a negative times a positive equals a negative number. Because this time you're facing the negative direction, but you're hopping forward once, twice. Last but not least, what happens if you have a negative number times a negative number? So, for example, negative 2 times negative 3. So this time our friend Spider-Man is going to start at 0, but he's going to face the negative direction since we're starting with a negative. And because we have this negative 3, he's actually going to hop backwards. So he's facing the negatives, and he's hopping backwards once and twice. And since he's facing the negatives and hopping backwards, he actually ends up in the positive direction. So negative 2 times negative 3, he landed at positive 6. So that's why a negative number times a negative number equals a positive number. Because what's happening is that they're facing the negatives, but they're hopping backwards. Once, twice. So that's what these all look like. Any number times 0, well, that would be facing anywhere, but we're not hopping at all, or each hop doesn't have any kind of distance, and so we just stay where we are. We would stay at 0. So any number times 0 equals 0. Alright, so that's the multiplication half of it. Looking at division, multiplication and division are opposite operations. And so we can kind of go backwards to look at some of these properties for division. So if you have a positive number divided by a positive number, well, if I look at my positives here, if I have a positive number divided by a positive number, notice how I'm going backwards here, it would equal a positive number. Alright, what about a positive number divided by a negative number? Well, I don't have any negatives over here, so I'm looking at the very bottom. If I have a positive number divided by a negative number, that would equal a negative number. Okay. What about a negative divided by a negative? A negative divided by a negative, I'm going to start with one of these negatives. Negative divided by a negative would equal a positive number. And a negative divided by a positive, well, a negative divided by a positive would give you a negative number. So we're just going in reverse order here, since they are opposite operations. Okay, let's talk about dividing by 0. Any number divided by 0, well, this would be something, and we're dividing it into 0 groups. So I think these two especially get people confused. So let's talk about what they really mean. A number divided by 0 would be like, I have a bunch of pizza and I'm trying to divide it into 0 pieces. Could you do that? Well, no, I can't make the pizza disappear. So if you divide by 0, that's actually undefined. You can't do it. And if you don't believe me, grab your calculator and try to divide by 0. Even your calculator will give you an error message, okay? Versus 0 divided by any number would be like, we don't have any pizza, and we're dividing it amongst several friends. Nobody gets pizza, but it's mathematically possible to do that. So 0 divided by a number equals 0, versus dividing by 0, it would be undefined. Okay, so there's the difference there. Alright, next up, let's do some fill in the blank. Let's talk about some vocabulary. Numbers that are being multiplied together are called factors. So you may have done factoring at some point. Prime factorization or factoring polynomials, either one, you may have done those before. Things that are getting multiplied together are called factors. The answer to a multiplication problem is called the product. So if you ever see the word product in a word problem, you know what they're talking about. They're talking about the answer to a multiplication problem. The answer to a division problem is called the quotient. Okay. Next up, some properties, just like what we had with addition and subtraction. Let's see, if you have 2 times 3, that would give you 6. If you have 3 times 2, that also would give you 6. And so what we see is that changing the order in multiplication doesn't change the outcome, it doesn't change the product. That property is called the commutative property of multiplication. Next up is grouping, and again, a lot of times you don't see these with parentheses. What you may see is just multiply 2 times 3 times 4. Okay, but how do you do that? Well, one person might multiply 2 times 3 first, which would be right here. They multiply 2 times 3 first, they get 6. And then they do 6 times 4, which would be 24. Somebody else might do the 3 times 4 first. They might do 3 times 4, which is 12, and then multiply that answer by 2, and 2 times 12 would also be 24. So we see that changing the grouping in multiplication does not change the product, and that property is called the associative property of multiplication. Okay. And both of these properties are really helpful for doing some mental math to help that go a little bit faster and a little bit easier. All right, next thing we're going to do is lots of examples. And example 1 just says simplify. And so we're going to do a lot of multiplication and a lot of division and go from there. First one in part A says negative 10 times 17. So we're multiplying, and 10 times 17 would be 170. And then we have a negative number times a positive number, which would be a negative number. So that's our answer, is negative 170. Next, in part B, I have negative 13 times negative 3. So first I'm going to do 13 times 3. 3 times 3 is 9, and 1 times 3 is 3. So 13 times 3 would give me 39. Then I need to decide if it's positive or negative. A negative times a negative is a positive, so our answer is going to be positive 39. All right, part C, we've got negative 54 divided by 6. So in division, what you might be thinking is 6 times what gives me 54? Well, if I know my multiplication facts well, I know that 6 times 9 equals 54. So that means that 54 divided by 6 would be 9. Then I need to decide the sign. A negative divided by a positive is a negative, so my answer is negative 9. Okay. Let's do another one. In part D, I have negative 11 times 6 times negative 4. And it's really up to you how you want to multiply all these things together. You can go left to right, you could do the negative times the negative and then multiply by the positive. The nice thing is that you can multiply in any order, as long as you multiply them all only once. Okay. So how about we just go left to right, because that seems not too terrible. So I'll start out with negative 11 times 6. So I know that 11 times 6 is 66. And then a negative times a positive is a negative. So now I have 11. Negative 11 times 6 is negative 66. Then we just bring down the next one. So now my next part in the multiplication is negative 66 times negative 4. Okay, this one I'm going to do over to the side. I'm not going to try to do that one in my head. So I have 66 times 4, and I'll deal with the sign in a minute. So 4 times 6 is 24, so that means that the 4 goes down and the 2 gets carried. 4 times 6 is still 24, but now I need to add that 2 in that I carried, so that would be 26. So 66 times 4 is 264. Then looking at the sign, a negative number times a negative number is a positive number. So my answer is positive 264. Okay. In part E, I've got negative 72 divided by negative 8. So I'm doing division again. So what I'm really thinking is 8 times what gives me 72? Well, I know that 8 times 9 is 72, so that means that 72 divided by 8 would be 9. Then I look at the sign. A negative number divided by a negative number is a positive number, so my answer is positive 9. All right, part F. We're testing you on the zeros now. So I've got negative 22 divided by 0, so this would be like $22 worth of debt. And we're trying to distribute that into 0 bank accounts. Can I do that? No, I can't just make debt disappear. That would be undefined. Okay. G, we've got negative 7 times negative 4 times negative 5 times negative 3. So there's lots of ways you can go about this. Personally, I would rather just break it into a couple groups to do the fewest multiplication possible. So I'm going to multiply the first two together first. Negative 7 times negative 4. Well, 7 times 4 is 28. And a negative times a negative gives me a positive. So I've got positive 28 from that multiplication. Negative 5 times negative 3. Well, 5 times 3 is 15. And a negative times a negative gives me a positive. So now I have 28 times 15. And again, I'm going to do this over to the side so that I don't make a mistake. Okay, when multiplying a couple digits by each other, you just start with the ones first and multiply all of that out. And then we'll do the tens column next and multiply that out. Okay, so I've got 5 times 8, which would be 40. Got 5 times 2, which would be 10, and then 10 plus 4 that I've carried would be 14. And now I've dealt with the 5. So now I'm ready for the 1 in the tens column. I'm going to cross that out so I don't get myself confused. Since I'm multiplying by 10 and not by 1, what you do is you put a 0 in that 1's place because you're multiplying in the tens column, not in the 1's column now. Then you do the multiplication with that. So 1 times 8 is 8, 1 times 2 is 2, And now I add all of those together. So I would have a 0, a 12, and a 4. So my answer is 420, and it is positive since I have a positive times a positive. Next up, in part H, I have 0 divided by -6. So this would be, I have $0, I'm dividing it among 6 friends. Nobody gets any money, but the answer is 0. It is not undefined. So an F dividing by 0 is undefined. If you have 0 divided by something, that's 0. All right, last one over here is I. I've got -13 times -4 times 0 times -9 times -31. This is an example of why you should read the whole problem before getting started, because I notice a 0 right here, and I know that anything times 0 is 0, so I can save myself a lot of work because I read the problem all the way through and found that 0. But regardless of what that product would be for all the other 4 multiplied together, once I multiply them by 0, the whole thing is going to be 0. And see, that was quick. Okay. All right, last thing down here is some word problems. So what we're going to do with all of these word problems is we're going to use front-end rounding first to estimate our answer for each one. And then after we've done that, we're going to find the exact answer. In part A, I have Hannah is getting ready to pay her tuition for this fall at St. Charles Community College. Tuition at SCC is $106 per credit hour for an in-district student, and Hannah is going to be taking 16 credit hours this fall. How much is she going to spend in tuition? So in general, how much is she going to spend for tuition? What I'm doing is I'm taking that tuition cost, that 106, and it's $106 per credit hour. She's taking 16 credit hours. So I'm going to do the cost per credit hour times the number of credit hours that she's taking. So I'm multiplying by 16. So that's the general problem we're doing. So let's do our estimating first. So when we're estimating, we do our front-end rounding and multiply those together. So 106 using front-end rounding would round to 100. The 16, the 6 would round up, so we would have times 20. And 100 times 20 would be $2,000. Okay? If you want the exact answer, we're going to have to multiply it out. So that's going to be 106 times 16. So I'm going to start with my ones column first. So 6 times 6 is 36. 6 times 0 is 0, plus the 3 that I carried would be 3. 6 times 1 is 6. And now I've dealt with that ones column. I'm ready for the tens column. So I'll add a 0 here for a placeholder. And then I'm ready to multiply. 1 times 6 is 6. 1 times 0 is 0. 1 times 1 is 1. And I add everything together. I've run out of space. 6 plus 0 is 6. 3 plus 6 is 9. 6 plus 0 is 6. And nothing plus 1 is 1. So our exact answer is $1,696 for the semester. Our next word problem says that Jackson's car gets 34 miles per gallon. If his car holds 16 gallons of gas, how far can Jackson's car go on a full tank of gas? All right, so we are starting with 34 miles per gallon. So each gallon of gas is going to go 34 miles, and he's going to do that for all 16 gallons. So that means that we can multiply by the 16 gallons to figure out how far he can go. Okay, so again, we're going to estimate first and then find an exact answer second. So to estimate, we're going to use front-end rounding. So my 34 will round down to 30. And my 16 will round up to 20. 30 times 20 is 600. So So we can go about 600 miles. That's our estimate. For the exact amount, we need to multiply it out. So we're going to do 34 times 16 to find the exact amount. 6 times 4 is 24. 6 times 3 is 18, and 18 plus the 2 that we've carried is 20. Now we're ready for our tens column here. 1 times 4 is 4, 1 times 3 is 3, and we're ready to add everything together. So that would be 4, 4, and 5. So our exact answer is 544 miles. Okay. Our last problem today says that an airplane descends 735 feet in 15 minutes. What is the average change in altitude each minute? So what it's asking for is altitude per minute, so altitude change divided by minutes. So we're going to do our 735, which is our altitude change, and we're going to do that for our minutes, so we're actually going to divide by 15 minutes to see how much it changes per minute. And again, we're going to start with an estimate, and then we'll get an exact answer second. So 735 would round down to 700 using front-end rounding, and 15 would round up to 20 using front-end rounding. So I'm doing 700 divided by 20, or if you want to take off a 0 on each, that's the same thing as 70 divided by 2, and 70 divided by 2 is 35. So our airplane is descending about 35 feet per minute. Okay. If I want an exact answer, I need to actually divide it out. And it seems like a good time to review some division. So we're going to do 735 divided by 15. So 15 doesn't go into 7, but 15 goes into 73. How many times? So I can just count up to it. So 1 time would be 15, 2 times would be 30, 3 times would be 45, 4 times would be 60, and 5 times would be 75, which is too much, so we only go in 4 times. 4 times 15 is 60. And then I subtract. 73 minus 16 would be 13. Then I can bring down a 5. And then you think, how many times does 15 go into 135? Okay, well, we can count up to it again. 15, 30, 45, 60. And I could even multiply that by 2 if I want to go faster. 4 more times then would be 120. And then 1 more time after that would be 135. So it actually goes in 9 times. And so our exact answer then would be 49. Okay. There we go. All right, hopefully this helps you guys do lots of practice. Please getting your multiplication and your division right. A lot of it has to do with signs today, but please also practice doing things without a calculator for the day. Good luck, and hope you guys have a wonderful day.